So tonight, the title of my small message is going to be, It's Not What You Say, But How You Say It. And I'm going to be reading out of 1 Kings 19, 9 through 16. So I'm going to go ahead and just read that right off the bat, and then we'll go from there. So, the Lord speaks to Elijah. There he came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, What are you doing here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I, am left, and they seek to take my life and to take it away. And God said, Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a low sound of the whisper. And Elijah heard it, and he wrapped his face in a cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, a voice came to him and said, What are you doing here, Elijah? And he said, I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And the Lord said to him, Go on your way into the wilderness of Damascus where you were, and when you arrive, you shall anoint a list of people. And so, this is a story about Elijah, who is a mighty man of God. Just a chapter before, in chapter 18, he had called down fire from heaven and killed all 450 prophets of Baal. There's no doubting that the Spirit of the Lord was with him and worked through him, but he was a human, and his fear got the best of him. And so, his fear got the best of him. If you go up just one verse before, it says, For 40 days he ran to Mount Horeb, or it's actually called Mount Sinai as well, which is where God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. And when he gets there to the mountain, God asks him a simple question, Elijah, what are you doing here? And his response was one of the heart. If you go back to chapter 18 again, it goes through how Elijah had just rebuilt the altars that other people had torn down and how he had kind of boasted about it. It also talks about how Jezebel had cut off the other prophets' heads, and that's why he was scared. And in chapter 18, verse 22, Elijah actually boasts about being the only prophet left. Like, it's I, Lord, I'm the only prophet left. Work through me. And so his complaints to God are all things that are in his heart. Like, he's angry. And it kind of he really knows what he's talking about when he's talking to God. And kind of think about like my own personal story. So I was able to relate with this because I've been angry before and angry at God. And I'll say, God, I've served you faithfully. And I'm striving to be pure in my heart. And I'm not breaking your laws. I'm trying not to break your laws. Like, why is this happening to me? Like, why do I feel like I'm dying? And I've yelled at God. And in the same way that God responds to us, he responded to Elijah when basically he yelled at him. You know, God, I've done all this stuff for you, and they want to kill me. Well, if you read this from verse 11 and verse 12, it says, God sent the wind to tear down the mountains, and God sent the earthquake to shake up the ground, and God sent a fire to burn away what was inside of him. And so personally, in the past couple months, God sends lots of things to break away what was holding me down. God sent earthquakes to shake up what was happening around me. God sent a fire to burn up every last thing that was inside of my soul that wasn't him. And God will do the same thing, and that's what God did to Elijah, because you can't see the presence of God until all the other stuff is stripped away. Because immediately after the wind comes, after the earthquake comes, after the fire comes, Elijah sees the presence of God. And immediately after that, the very next verse, God asks him again, Elijah, what are you doing here? And his answer is the same, but his heart is different. Because the difference between verse 9 and verse 15 is the posture of Elijah's heart. And the commentary in my Bible does not say that's what this is. The commentary says, Elijah was like a brat and he was stubborn and, he was still just complaining to God about the same things. But see, I see it kind of differently because I've walked through this. Because Elijah sat there and said, Lord, I've been jealous for you, and they've forsaken your covenant, and they're seeking to kill me, and they've taken down your altars. And he brought his cares to the Lord instead of angrily throwing his cares at the Lord. And this is true because I can stand before God now after I have been in the presence of God, surrendered my life to him. I now know there's a call on my life to proclaim the good news to the poor, to the captives, to talk about the freedom in Jesus Christ. I now know I can stand and say, Lord, I've served you faithfully, and I'm trying to be pure in my heart, and I'm trying not to break your laws. Do you see how it's totally different tone? And after Elijah responded to God in this way with a different tone, he said it different. God gave him a new call on his life, because when you surrender to God and you give him your heart, he'll take away the things that scare you. He'll take away the things that pressure you. So Elijah was afraid of Jezebel. He was this great, mighty man of God, but he ran in fear. And that fear, he was pressured. So God, in his mercy, after Elijah turned his posture towards him, moved him from the position of prophet to the position of teacher. And he gave him someone to comfort him, someone to be with him, and that is in Elisha, the prophet that came right after Elijah. And God didn't rebuke Elijah for being upset. He didn't rebuke Elijah for being afraid. He just simply moved his calling to something different. And to me, it seems as though Elijah encountered the Spirit of God and had a heart transformation. So it wasn't about what he said. It was just all about how he said it.